Matot-Masei speaks about the 42 journeys, 42 stages that the Israelites went from the moment they left Egypt until they came to the land of Canaan, the land of Israel. The Kabbalists explain that these 42 stages, these 42 travelings, the Zohar tells us we're not reading about the history, but that every single person, their life, whether they are aware of it or not, goes through these same 42 stages. From the inception of the soul until its final correction, there are 42 steps, 42 stages. So when we read these readings of the 42 stages, we are not simply reading history, we're not even reading, as the Kabbalists say, simply that this is all the blueprint for the history, for the future of humanity, till the world in its completion comes to the end of the correction. But it also encompasses every aspect of our life, the parts that we've been through already, and the parts or the stages that we will come to through elevation and correction. At the core, the great Kabbalist Rabbi Chaim Ben Attar says, the entire discussion here is about the elevation of sparks. The purpose of our soul, from the time it was created, is to take sparks of light that are in darkness and elevate them to a new and renewed connection to the light of the Creator. When enough of those sparks are elevated through our work, then we achieve what's called the Gemara Tikkun, the end of the correction. How do we elevate those sparks? It says that the individual's desire is what elevates the spark. The Israelites traveled from one place to the other and then to the next one. They weren't always aware of what light there was available to them, but if throughout the travels and throughout the challenges of those travels they maintained clarity of consciousness and desire to connect to the light of the Creator, then no matter whether they were conscious of it or not, sparks of light came out of darkness, attached themselves to their soul, and elevated through them. So the understanding is that the process of elevating these sparks is not always a conscious process. The majority of the sparks that we need to elevate are sparks that are unconscious. Rabbi Chaim Ben Attar uses the example of a magnet, that when a person is connected and a person has desire to connect to the light of the Creator, he becomes a magnet for the sparks. When you're walking down the street or you're traveling, there are sparks that are waiting for you to become a magnet for them. What is the power that draws those sparks out? It is the clarity of consciousness and the desire to connect, to be connected to the light of the Creator. Unfortunately, a person can walk down that street for 50 years, and if he never walks down that street where his sparks are waiting for him with desire for connection with the light of the Creator, those sparks won't jump out and attach themselves to that person. And therefore, one of the most important lessons of this portion is the importance of fighting for desire for connection. Because it is not simply the desire for connecting as a tool to bring us to connect. It's actually the most powerful tool to draw all the light that we need and all the sparks that we need into us. There's a kind of a sad section in the Midrash. We know Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu, was what's called the prophet of destruction, because he was the one who tried to awaken the Israelites before the destruction, and nobody listened to him. And it says that throughout that time, he was going around and telling people, listen, become awakened, awakening a desire to connect. Don't you realize you can lose all the blessings that you have if you do not live with a desire to connect constantly to the light of the Creator? Nobody listened to him. And then it says that finally the destruction occurred and the Israelites are being pushed into exile. And it says that they sat down by the river. We know it's a famous section from Psalms. Then they sat down by the river of Babylon and they began crying because they saw that Jeremiah was leaving them. And they started crying and said, how can you leave us? We have such a desire to connect now. And he said to them, I promise you, because there were thousands upon thousands crying and in pain, he said to them, had you cried once when I spoke to you, when you were still in the land of Israel, none of this would have happened. So desire, which was awakened for them at the time of distraction, all that desire meant nothing. As he said, had you cried once when I tried to awaken you? And crying means a sense when there's something that I need, and we're talking specifically about the need of our soul to connect to the light of the Creator.
If you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Book now with me one-to-one session in angel coaching and communication coaching. To learn more, email or DM me. Enjoy the video.
Jeremiah said, had you cried once, had you awakened true desire once, none of this pain, None of this distraction had to occur. We want to feel both the distance between ourselves and the light of the Creator and awakening that desire. And now we understand even more that desire is what draws light to us. So we learn from here that the importance of desire has at least twofold. Number one, sparks of light all around us that we need, that the world needs for us to elevate, is waiting. Waiting not simply for you to make a connection, not simply for you to do an action of sharing, because those actions, of course, yes, they reveal a certain amount of light, but it is desire that draws light to you. And draws light to you, not just consciously, but more importantly, unconsciously. The more we can live with desire for a true connection to the light of the Creator, we won't even realize where all this light is coming to us from. Because it's not coming necessarily from our connections. It's coming from all these sparks that have been waiting for us to awaken desire. And that's what happened with the Israelites in the desert. Why were they there for 40 years? Because throughout those 40 years, they were waiting to see the sparks of light that were in the desert. We're waiting for desire. We're waiting for the Israelites as they traveled from one place to the other. And we know they traveled 42, but there were actually 50 because there were 8 times they had to walk back. Why did they have to go back and forth? Because they didn't have desire. And traveling here represents life's travel, which is each and every one of our individual lives and incarnation and the world's travels. So how do you elevate? How do you complete that journey? Only with desire. If you do 50 years of work and you share and you connect, but you're not awakening desire, then all those lost sparks that are waiting to be elevated and become part of you, assist you, and bring you light and blessings can't attach themselves to you. That's what Masei is about. Not simply the understanding that this is our life, but the clarity that the greater we can awaken a desire for a connection to the light of the Creator, that is more important than the connection itself. That is more important than the action itself. And that's one of the most important questions we have to ask ourselves. How great is my desire? Not saying, oh, I do this spiritual work, so I'm okay. But am I doing it with desire? Because desire for connection is more important than the connection. Most of us know the story of Rav Ashlag, the founder of the center, had a teacher. He met him coincidentally, and he was his concealed teacher. He studied with him for a number of months, and as Rav Ashlag writes, his ego began to grow. And as his ego began to grow, Rav Ashlag writes, his teacher began becoming distant from him. He couldn't find him. He went to his home. He wasn't there. And then for months, Rav Ashlag realized that his teacher left him because his ego had grown with all those wisdoms. And he worked on himself and he diminishes his ego. He meets his teacher for one day. 3 months later, his teacher reveals to him a great secret, then passes away the next day. So in total, Rav Ashlag studied with his teacher for only a number of months. Rav Ashlag then writes something else. He said, when my teacher left me, when my teacher passed away, I forgot everything he had ever taught me. Now, if you think about it, it's unbelievable. What was the purpose of all this interaction? He meets this amazing teacher, he studied with him, his ego gets too big, his teacher goes away, his teacher comes back for a day, he teaches him a secret, his teacher passes away, he forgets everything he had ever learned from him. But then Rav Ashlag says, once I had tasted wisdom, once I have tasted light, he says, then time, weeks and months and years, he says beautiful words, Dalu enai lamomim, I began begging. His desire was awakened and he started begging and begging and begging. And finally, Rav Ashlag said, not only did I recall and received again all the great light and wisdom that my teacher had given me, but all the gates of wisdom opened up for me and all the gates of light opened up for me. And we learned from here a very important lesson. The purpose of a teacher is not to teach. The purpose of study is not to learn. The purpose of connection is not connection. The purpose of all those things is only one, to awaken a greater desire. Rav Ashlag's purpose in finding this unbelievable teacher was not to study from him, was not to receive wisdom from him. It was not to connect to him. Only one thing, to awaken desire. And because that happened, all the gates were open to him. All wisdom was open to him. All light was open to him. And this is the awakening we want to have. Because what if you don't have that desire? You might listen into this and say, look, I do what I can. I make my connections. What do you want from me? I just don't have it. This is the portion to ask for it. If you really understand that unless you're living with a constant growth of a desire to connect to the light of the Creator, you're not satisfied with this much or that much light or wisdom, but you understand that the most important aspect of your spiritual life is a growing desire. Then you ask for it because you come to understand that the most important thing, more than wisdom, more than understanding, more than studying, more than connecting, is desire. And you realize that nothing else that we're doing in our spiritual work compares to this need. And if you don't feel it and you don't have it, this is the portion to beg for it. I realize that I cannot continue being connected or growing unless my desire grows, because if not, then all the study and all the connection will not bring you to where your soul meant to get to. Will not get you through the 42 stages of your soul's journey, because that light and those sparks and that journey can only be completed through a constant growth and desire. So ask, give me a growing, constant desire and yearning for the light of the Creator. The second gift of this portion is based on teaching of Rav Ashlag in the book, You Should Choose Life. Rav Ashlag begins the conversation with a statement from the Talmud. It says, "Bezman she'atzibur shru'im betza'ar," when there is pain in the world, Al yomar ha'adam elech el beiti, a person should not say ve'echol ve'eshteh, I'll just continue living my life, I'll take care of myself, I'll take care of my spiritual self, I'll take care of my physical self. יצער האדם עם הציבור וזוכה ורואה בנחמת הציבור. The only people, the Talmud says, that will merit to see the final redemption aren't the spiritual people who do their spiritual work, but the people who take the time to truly experience and internalize the pain that exists in the world. Rav Ashlag explains the depth of this teaching throughout the writings of the Kabbalists and even in the writings of the Torah. You come across two words which most people see them as religious, and 99.9% of the world does not understand these two words, and it's Rasha and Tzaddik. So Rasha is translated as a negative person or an evil person or a bad person. Tzaddik is translated as a righteous person, a good person, a spiritual person. And you find these words throughout the writings and throughout the Kabbalistic books, Tzaddik and Rasha, righteous and evil, or good and bad people. How people usually understand that? You look at somebody, oh, he steals, he is an evil person. You look at somebody, oh, she shares, she's a good person. So I can judge a person, this is a righteous person, this is a bad person. That's the way these two words were understood for thousands and thousands of years, until Rav Ashlag comes along and literally upends these two words, and with them, hopefully, the way we view ourselves and the world. Rav Ashlag says, do you know what the word tzaddik, or a good, righteous person, means? It's very simple. A person who experiences good, this is a tzaddik. A person who experiences bad is a rasha. That's simple. Ask yourself, because nobody can know, what are you experiencing? If you're experiencing goodness, you're a tzaddik. You're a righteous, good person. You're connected. If you're experiencing bad, if you're experiencing negativity, you are a rasha, completely disconnected from the light of the Creator. And Rav Ashlag says, a person who's experiencing darkness, negativity, no matter what words he might say, they cannot contradict the reality of their experience. If you're experiencing bad, you're disconnected. If you're experiencing good, you're connected. And therefore, you can never know, because it is not dependent on actions. You cannot judge a person to be connected or disconnected, because the only indication of whether a person is connected or disconnected is the person's personal experience in that moment. And therefore, Rav Ashlag says, every person goes through connected and disconnected every single day, moment to moment, every day, maybe 100 times, and every week, maybe 1,000 times. But what's important is that it changes completely the way we view good and bad, or a person or ourselves being connected or disconnected, which means today you woke up in the morning and somebody did something to you and it really upset you. And now you're spiritual, right? So you're sitting, connecting to the Zohar, you're listening to a class, so you're connected. But if you're scanning the Zohar and you're angry, if you're experiencing bad, then no matter what experience you might be having, you're not a tzaddik. You're not connected. And my teacher, the Rav, would often tell people 30 years ago, some people will come to our Shabbat connection and they really enjoy playing golf, and the Rav would tell them, look, if you enjoy that experience more than you're enjoying being here during the reading of the Torah, I want you to go play golf on Shabbat, not to come to the center. Why? Because if you're at the golf course and your experiencing in that moment is good, then you're connected. If you're sitting at the reading of the Torah and you're angry or disappointed, you're disconnected. The Rav said, be a tzaddik rather than be a rasha. If you understand and appreciate this revelation of Rav Ashlag, it changes everything. The individual's experience in that moment, in that day, in that week, is what makes them either a tzaddik, a person who is connected, or a rasha, a person who's disconnected. Ultimately, Rav Ashlag says, what is the purpose of life? The purpose of life is to be a tzaddik, to be a righteous person. What does that mean? That more and more of our experiences are positive, because we, for the most part, control our experience. We can control whether in this moment, let's say this person slaps me in the face, I can choose if I experience that as good or I experience it as bad. The purpose of life is that we grow to become a tzaddik. What does that mean? It means that we grow. Let's say if yesterday 35% of my day I was a tzaddik, which means 35% of the day I experienced the goodness of this world, and 65% I was a rasha, I experienced the darkness of this world. Today, 36%, and the next day, 37%, and so on. That's the purpose of life. This is the entire work of Kabbalah, the entire spiritual work, finding the ways. Why do we connect to the Zohar? Because you will not be able to experience more and more things regardless of their objective reality. You will not be able to experience them as goodness unless you're growing and you're connecting and you're elevating. The more connected you are, the more you can experience the goodness regardless of what is occurring objectively around you. That's the purpose of the tools, the Zohar, sharing, to elevate you to a state where you can be more of a tzaddik, meaning where you can experience more of the goodness. You could desire to see goodness all the time, but if you're not using the tools, the chances of you growing in that capacity, very, very little. That's the purpose of the tools. But the ultimate purpose is to become a tzaddik. Now we understand righteous is not a religious term. It's not even a spiritual term. It's very simple. It's an experiential term. What are you experiencing right now? Now, Rav Ashlag takes it a step further. We are meant not only to elevate ourselves, but to elevate the world. How do we elevate the world? When you truly experience somebody else's pain as your own, you really work on it, you really take the time to internalize the pain that they're going through, and then through your own spiritual work, you are able to find for them, even if you don't even say to them, the goodness of that experience. You've elevated them and you've elevated the world. The only way for you to elevate the world is by both experiencing their pain and then finding the element of goodness within it. If you have the opportunity, of course, to share that with them and elevate them consciously, of course, that's amazing. How many times you're sitting with friends and they're telling you their challenges that they go through, and for you it's just so clear that this is so perfect for them, that no other possibility will be better than what they're actually experiencing right now. And in order to do that, you have to experience their pain, and either consciously to be able to share with them, or even without sharing with them, seeing the goodness there. You elevate them and you elevate the world this way. Therefore, Rav Ashlag says, why do the Kabbalists tell us, unless you are experiencing others' pain, and Rav Ashlag add the additional element and finding the goodness in there with them or for them, you will never see the final redemption, because you're not the totality of the spiritual work. One part of the spiritual work, as we said, is to become a tzaddik, to begin experiencing more and more of what is occurring to you as goodness, and that elevates you to be a tzaddik, a righteous person who sees the goodness more and more and more using the tools. But as important, Rav Ashlag quotes a verse, "A tzaddik avad ve'en ish sama lev." Literally means the righteous person disappears or goes away and nobody pays attention. Rav Ashlag says, what are we talking about there. We're talking about individuals' righteousness, me, that unless I do the external work of experiencing other people's pain and finding a way for them and yourself to see the goodness in that experience, your level of a tzaddik, your ultimate correction can never occur. Your tzaddik will disappear. Your level of clarity and the purpose of what your soul came into this world would go away and never be accomplished by you. This is why it says that unless you're experiencing the other's pain as your own, you will never see the final redemption. You will never see the elevation. And therefore, the second tremendous gift, and if you have the book, You Should Choose Life, it's in section 122. This is the gift of this portion, the ability to prepare ourselves to be a part and able to see the final redemption, to be a part. And in this world physically, when that change occurs, two things have to be at the core of our spiritual work. This understanding. We have to be growing in our tzaddik, which means ask yourself this question: what percentage of my day, of my week, of my month am I experiencing as goodness? If that's not growing, I'm not sure what's the rest of the spiritual work is about, because the entire purpose of tools that we use and the connections that we make is to be able to make me more of a tzaddik, to make me more of the experiencing, more of the goodness that is around. And the second half, how am I elevating the world? And that begins, Rav Ashlag says, with your friends, with your family, experiencing their pain as yours, and then finding the goodness for them and for you in that. And only if that second half, because you can try to be experiencing your own life as goodness, Rav Ashlag says, that will take you only to 50%. What's called a benoni, a mediocre person spiritually. If you want to be a tzaddik gamur, a completely elevated person, you have to be with the people's pain, your friends, your family, those around you, and find the goodness in it and elevate that darkness, that pain to light and goodness for them. And then you will merit to see not only your own elevation, but the elevation of this world, and to be in this world for the time when pain, suffering, and death will be removed in this physical body, for the final geula, for the final redemption.